Hello and welcome to the third in the Gaming Spotlight series. I'm here with Hugh as ever, and we're going to open out with GDC, Hugh. So what are we expecting from this big old show this year?
Quite a lot, actually. This is going to be quite an interesting one. So obviously we're having the PS4 and Xbox One out now. It's a little different to last year, but the big one, I think, is the news we broke, which is that Sony's set to unveil its PS4 virtual reality headset, which has been a long time coming. It was rumoured to be at Gamescom, then the Tokyo Game Show last year, and Sony's been putting it off and off. And the reason we've been told and other people have been told is because they really want to perfect it before they show it off. Well, you've got Oculus, which has kind of gone through the different iterations, which is fine. You know, it's been good for developers, but I think Sony really want to put out a really mint product.
Well, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because Sony have been criticised at times for releasing products maybe ahead of them being perfectly the final product. They quite often sort of build and reiterate it. And I think Oculus has obviously proved there's a real interest in this kind of thing. I mean, I was at a BAFTA event yesterday playing some Elite, the new Elite game on an Oculus Rift, and it is pretty special. But you can imagine, so I mean, they are dev kits, aren't they? And Sony will want to do a finished, polished product that they feel is ready for the consumer. You know, maybe not sold to the consumer yet, but is close to being a consumer-ready product.
I mean, I'm really excited to try it out. I honestly believe Sony have probably put a lot into this product, and I'm interested to see how it works. And at the same time, though, I mean, it is kind of bad news for Oculus Rift. The other bad news for Oculus Rift is they've announced this week that they're not selling dev kits anymore because they've run out of the components. Now, I think we might hear something at GDC from Oculus. There might be some sort of announcement to say, you know, we're pushing out a beta version of the consumer version, or we're going to put the Crystal Cove version out there. I think we're getting to that point now where people are starting to say, okay, you promised a 2014 release for Oculus Rift, are we going to get it?
And that is a big problem, isn't it? Because if it becomes vaporware, I mean, gaming has a great history of vaporware, and I mean, generally software. I mean, Duke Nukem's the one that obviously gets mentioned most. But I mean, in terms of hardware, saying you're going to release this year, I mean, you maybe got a little bit of leeway if it's super cool, but if Sony are coming in and doing a headset, suddenly the pressure's on, and all of the hype that Oculus has garnered, quite rightly, in the last 6 months, I mean, they are, you know, the really interesting bits of kit, that could all evaporate very quickly.
On the other hand as well, we've got Microsoft who'll be at GDC. Now it sounds like they're going to be focusing more on their sort of cross-screen stuff. So they're going to be talking a bit about smart glass, which is good for me because I feel like smart glass has been forgotten. It was really talked up, you know, pre-Xbox One release, and we haven't heard anything much.
Well, it's worrying, isn't it? I mean, we've talked a lot about Xbox One, but there's an awful lot of this stuff that's kind of cool that people got quite invested in, and then it just seems to have just disappeared, just edged out of sight. You know, just been, you know, Sony are doing this amazing virtual reality headset. Even if that is super expensive and no one buys it, it's interesting and it's exciting and it's vibrant and it's all the stuff that we want to see. Yeah. It's not, here's smart glass. It does exactly what we kind of hyped it to ages ago, but we haven't really mentioned it since. I mean, that's not exciting. That's just like doing what you should have done in the first place, isn't it? Yeah.
I think there's a lot more potential in Kinect. I think we could see some really exciting stuff. I think just because of the messaging early on that kind of we got the impression that Microsoft was stepping back from Kinect a little bit towards the release of the Xbox One. I think there's a lot of potential, and I think it is a powerful tool. I just don't think developers have had enough time to really kind of get it all out so far. I mean, what are your thoughts on Kinect at the moment?
That it's underwhelming, and that's probably the worst word you can use to describe tech, especially tech that's meant to be built around hype. You know, for the core gamers, Kinect has always been a little bit of a, I mean, all motion control has always been a little bit of a touchy subject. Yeah. Or non-touchy. Yeah. But I think that it's built on getting the hype earlier and making people want to do it. And, you know, I thought their fitness stuff had some kind of traction and all that kind of stuff. But actually, it just seems to have been sidelined a little bit. And I'd like to think they can bring back the hype, but I think the time is, the window of opportunity is shrinking and if not closing.
Yeah, it is. However, some better news for the Xbox One. We've had Titanfall release finally, which I'm, you know, I really enjoy. Yeah, I am. I mean, generally, it's great. I mean, I think this is the franchise that will replace Call of Duty, and I think it's about time as well. I mean, it's a cool idea. You know, it's been executed well. I don't get the impression EA have kind of stuck their fingers in too much. They've kind of let the Respawn guys just finish it as they wanted to. And, you know, it's generally getting people excited about the Xbox One. I mean, I think this is the first system seller of this generation.
Well, the queues at the BAFTA event were fairly telling. They were queuing a long way back to get in to play Titanfall, and I think that's really interesting. I mean, the other thing is obviously giant robots appeal to quite a big global market, and they've always been fairly popular.
Yeah.
I think the mix of the Call of Duty and the giant mechs thing, I think that's kind of cool, isn't it? And it does seem to be getting a lot of attention.
It is, and I mean, you know, it's just a cool idea. The only criticism so far has been on the single-player campaign, of which there isn't really one. There was early on, there were signs that we'd have something with a bit more depth and maybe a bit more narrative, and as it turns out, it's more just a kind of multiplayer campaign, really. It's nothing, you know, that stands alone as anything particularly exciting. But I don't know if that is a bad thing particularly. I mean, do we always need a single player campaign with a heavy narrative?
I think narrative's really fascinating in games because it's one of those things that people get really hot and bothered about. I mean, I sat in a really interesting talk at the BAFTA thing about, it was from Murdered Soul Suspect guys, Airtight, and they were talking about narrative, and they were sort of criticising gamers for skipping through the cinematics. They were both people, I mean, one was a story writer, one was an former art director who now heads up the studio, and I mean, tongue in cheek, they were saying, "Goddamn players, you know, skipping through all our hard work." It really annoyed me because I inherently believe that cinematics are a misstep in gaming. I just think that I have very little tolerance for sitting through passively watching something like I would on a television when I'm playing a game. I feel like I should be involved in it, and even like the QuickTime stuff, I just think that's pathetic. It's like we've thrown some interactivity. I'm not saying that Murdered is particularly a problem with this. I'm sure they thought about it a lot, but I mean just generically, I mean. I loved things like the beginning of Half-Life, which is obviously one big cutscene where you're going about your job, right? The original Half-Life. I loved that, but you could still go and explore the world. It didn't make you feel like you were being pressured into it. They put time pressures on you with cues, but they didn't make it feel like they were trying to pace it out and tell you a story. Basically, you are the story, and I find that quite irritating.
Games are about engagement. They are, as their form, they're about engagement. So yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't want to sit through a 5-10 minute cinematic, maybe longer in some cases. I think, you know, there are good examples of how it's done right. You look at things like Fallout or BioShock, where the narrative's done as you play. You know, you pick up the tape recorders and stuff, and you know, it's almost optional, but it's all hidden in the world for you to find and kind of put the pieces together as you go along.
I think that's the key. I mean, the art. I think they are potentially an art form. I think they're entertainment. I think that the whole art term is a little bit wishy-washy, let's be honest. But I think that the point is you create this world that we get to live in. You know, the story is our story. We are the heroes of the games, and that's kind of all, you know, that we are the protagonists in the games. And that's the point. And the moment you take me out of that and you make me sit through something else, you're telling me the story, and it's not my story anymore. You're seizing back control from me. I don't like that. I like to control my own story. They were talking about the difficulty in having, you know, because generally it's a secondary character saying, "Come on, follow me. We're going to go and do this. We need to unlock this door. We need to." And they were saying that, you know, but people go off in the opposite direction and do their own thing.
Oh, do be careful.
Damn right we do, because we want to go and explore this amazing world that has been created, and if the world's not explorable, if you feel like you're on rails, then you're just having a story told to you. And I think it's people trying to make movies with games, and I think games should be making games with games. And I do think that you can have plot, and I do think that you can pace things, but I think it's more difficult if you try and do it in a gaming way, and I think it's lazy. I almost think it's lazy to go through this kind of cutscene route. It's very old school thinking. I'm not saying that all cutscenes are bad, or that I haven't watched the odd one and thought that's really impressive, but it's taking you out of the moment and showing you a video in the middle of what you're doing, and I find that a little bit irritating.
You see, I agree with you on this, but I think a lot of gamers wouldn't, and I think the perfect example of where big cinematics are used, and it does resonate with gamers, is Metal Gear Solid. That franchise is famous for its ridiculously long cutscenes. I mean, Metal Gear Solid 4 was, you know, some people say it was just a long movie, because it was. There were a lot of cutscenes in that game. But, you know, for those criticisms, gamers still loved it. Of course, Metal Gear Solid's also been getting a bit of attention this week as well because of Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes, which is the sort of the first part of the Phantom Pain duo, which is it's essentially a demo for the Phantom Pain, but it's coming out at a price point, it's going to be around about sort of £25–30, which is quite a lot, considering that apparently the devs can speed run this game in 5 minutes.
It's fairly shameless, isn't it? Isn't it cashing in on fan excitement? And you know, in my day, we used to get, you know, I'm an old man now, especially in gaming terms, but in my day, we used to get demos on covers that made us, you know, thrilled us, that got us buying these games. And now it's like, now you're selling us your demos?
Well, this is the exact problem. I mean, the Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty demo, which was, I think it was packaged with Zone of the Enders, and then it was released with a magazine later. I mean, that was quite short, but there was a lot of depth in it, and, you know, that was free. You know, paying £30 now for what is essentially a demo, I mean, it seems a lot. But then again, this is the question of sort of where do we put that value in games? You know, if there's a lot of richness in this, it might be short, but there's a lot to explore. You know, there's a lot of other stuff going on here in terms of narrative as well. I mean, if you compare it to download content, you know, I mean, people would go out and pay £20 for an extra bit of download content that's potentially has less in it than this. So I'm not so sure it's such a bad thing. You know,
well, I think that's I think that's the other way around. If you've bought a full game and then you want to buy extra stuff on top of that, you've bought the game, you're invested in the product, you're right up to speed, and then you're buying stuff to enhance that world, to build that world further. Saying you can buy the add-on before you buy the game, which is essentially, I think, what this is doing. You can't buy the whole world. You can buy a little corner here, and then when we release the big world, you can. I think that's pretty cynical.
But if there's a lot of depth in it, I mean, this is my point. There's a lot. I mean, even that Metal Gear Solid 2.
Would you pay for it?
You know, I probably would shell out for £25, maybe 30. But there you go. That's just me.
So that's it for another week's Gaming Spotlight.
Make sure you let us know what you think below. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.